First of all, I'd like to thank Heather for reaching out to me, inviting me to speak today. And, you know, very curious about the next presentation as well and what your questions will be. And so I'll just begin. I'm going to give you a review of the recommendations on the recent task force on cannabis. And so I want to keep clear that it is recommendations. What the government will do with these recommendations, we don't know yet.
Yeah.
But I'll start off with just saying, in case people aren't aware, that cannabis is quite different than other drugs that we use or we buy at the drugstore because it's a plant drug. Many of the drugs that we use every day that are, supports for our health are synthetic drugs, or what we call semi-synthetic drugs. So with a plant drug, they contain many cannabinoids, and probably the one that most of us are familiar with is THC. And THC contains some of the psychoactive properties of cannabis. When people say that they feel a bit high, or they're feeling the effects of cannabis, they're usually speaking about the THC. CBD, though, is used as a cannabinoid that scientists are finding have much therapeutic value in pain management, and it doesn't have a psychoactive effect. So I wanted to make that clear because people who are authorized to use cannabis for medicinal purposes in Canada are often purchasing from the licensed producers the cannabis that has more CBD and less THC, or no THC at all and only CBD. So just something for us to be aware of. It's been used for, as I said, psychoactive and therapeutic use, but in Canada, recreational cannabis use has been criminalized since 1923. In fact, we didn't really have a discussion in Parliament, we just criminalized it because we were doing that with other drugs and sort of threw it in the mix. But Canada didn't have a cannabis-using population until the 1960s. We know that there's less social and health risks associated with cannabis than alcohol and tobacco, but I'm not suggesting that there aren't health risks. I just want to point out, if you have a hierarchy of drugs and associated risks, alcohol and tobacco are still on the top of that list. We're seeing more and more scientific papers, and there was just a review, a medical review in the United States, that there are demonstrated therapeutic uses for pain management and other medical conditions. And there has never been historically one documented cannabis overdose. So it's quite different than some of the, let's say, opioid medications that people use. So our drug regulation comes under quite a few acts, but the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act is the act that regulates cannabis. It's considered to be a Schedule II drug. And I'm not going to say much about these other regulations. I will go through them, but I'm going to, I think, center on the access to cannabis for medical purposes regulation, because that's what affects the shelters and the transition homes the most. So the Food and Drug Act is just how we regulate all drugs that we prescribe or over the counter. And we usually have clinical trials and an approval system for those drugs. We also have what we call Section 56, and this allows us to use drugs that are illegal in Canada, but for clinical trials and research purposes. We have a Section 56 for Insight. Any supervised injection site, federally approved, has to have an approval through a Section 56, so that people can bring illegal drugs onto that site but not fear arrest. We also have a special access program where some people are receiving heroin-assisted treatment. Right now that's only in Vancouver at Crosstown Clinic, but that program allows doctors to request to use a drug that's not approved in Canada at the moment, but shows benefit for their patients. So that could be HIV/AIDS drug, any type of drug. We have a larger narcotic control regulations. around administering, prescribing, and transporting and transferring drugs. And we also have regulation around industrial hemp. And we have an industrial hemp production here in Canada, but all of that cannabis has to have less than 0.3 THC by weight in order to produce it and then to sell it and to make goods out of it. Okay, so in 2016, we enacted another access to cannabis for medical purposes regulation. And the courts have long recognized in Canada the benefits of medical cannabis. And due to Supreme Court decisions, a federal regulatory system was set up in 2001, and it's evolved quite a bit since then. What people need now is medical documentation from a licensed health practitioner, and this is a little different than what we had before, because now a nurse practitioner can actually sign the form that you need authorizing the use of cannabis for medical purposes. And that form is sent to one of our 38 registered licensed producers in Canada. Right now, people who are authorized to use cannabis for medical purposes can only buy the cannabis through these licensed producers. And they're all across Canada. But as many of you know, there's quite a few compassion clubs, pop-up dispensaries, especially in some of our major city centers. And those may be regulated through the municipalities, but they aren't legal entities. So only the 38 registered licensed producers are federally approved and legal. Also, under the new regulation, if you're authorized to use cannabis, you can apply to grow your own, or you can apply to designate someone else to grow for you. And it's within the health practitioner to suggest how much that person would need to grow to satisfy their medicinal use of cannabis. So we've had many cannabis commissions, from 1968 to Lodain Commission that said that we should abolish simple possession of cannabis, to 2001 Senate report, Senator Nolan, who recommended that we legalize and regulate cannabis, to a special House of Commons report that suggested that we decriminalize cannabis. So our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, he campaigned saying that he would legalize, regulate, and restrict access to cannabis if he was elected. And he was elected with a majority government. And so he brought together, through the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Public Safety, and the Minister of Health, a task force that would come together and consult and provide advice on the design of a new legislative and regulatory framework. And so what I want to say that was unusual and maybe interesting about that task force is that we were coming in knowing that we were committed to creating a design to legalize and regulate and restrict access. There was no debate about whether it should be legalized. We were coming in already with the commitment that we would create a design to legalize and regulate cannabis. And so just this is the task force membership. And MP Liberal Bill Blair was the liaison between the task force and the government as well. So in order to engage Canadians, we had 5 months, and that was partially over the summer, to engage with Canadians to get feedback on what they would like to see in relation to legalization and regulating cannabis in Canada. And the government prepared a discussion paper that was available online for people to take a look at, citizens across Canada. And it had 5 major themes: minimizing the harms of use, establishing a safe and responsible production system, designing an appropriate distribution system, enforcing public safety and protection, and assessing cannabis for medicinal purposes. So in order to assess what the different provinces and territories and municipal governments and different organizations and individuals felt about the issue, the task force traveled to most of the provincial capitals. They went to the north. They held discussions in communities across the country. And they also had an online portal that was open for 60 days. And they had almost 30,000 submissions. And that was people answering the questions that were put forth in the discussion paper. There are also 300 written submissions, and that was from various organizations across Canada, sort of outlining their worries, their fears, or what they would like to see, what the literature was. There's also study tours. We went to Colorado and Washington, who had already legalized and are regulating recreational use of cannabis. And we also spoke with the government of Uruguay because they have also legalized and are currently regulating cannabis. There's now 8 U.S. states who have legalized recreational cannabis, and though Canada was the first country to have a federal medical marijuana program, 28 U.S. states and many European countries also have medical cannabis programs. And I have to say we had a lot of debate about, most of us, use the word marijuana, but in fact the scientific name is cannabis. And so we adopted that in our report to speak about the issues. And so after consulting with Canadians and experts in the area, we wrote a collective report, and we submitted that at the end of November, and it became public in December. And in our report, we followed sort of the template that the government had created in their discussion paper. So we introduced what is cannabis, what is the literature on minimizing harms of use, how can we establish a safe and responsible supply chain, how would we enforce public safety, medical access, and the implementation at the federal, provincial, and municipal level, because all three have different responsibilities in relation to cannabis. And so we set up a minimum age, is what we recommended, at 18, knowing that the provinces have the full right to coordinate their age according to what they have for alcohol as well. So it might be 18 and 19, depending on the province or territory. We asked that they restrict advertising and promotion, and that there be only plain packaging for cannabis products, and with just the strain name, the price, and the amount of THC and CBD and other warning and label requirements. Because we've learned that if you package things, that are quite appealing to youth, you're more likely to buy it. And so we felt that there should be also nothing that would be appealing to youth that would look or resemble any type of food item, such as candy or cookies, or have cartoon characters, similar to what we've been doing with tobacco packaging. We also said that there should be prohibited any type of mixing of cannabis with alcohol or cannabis with tobacco, nicotine, or caffeine, and to design a tax scheme that would be based on THC potency. So the more potent the product, the more it would be taxed. And we've seen that this is quite successful in alcohol, taxing a high alcohol content liquor more than, let's say, a beer or wine. And also to implement an evidence-informed public education campaign targeting different populations and youth, because the education campaign could be quite different. And that the government would commit to using the revenue from cannabis as a source of funding for prevention, education, and treatment. So I want to make a point of this because our report and the government had made clear too that they don't see the legalization and regulation of cannabis as a profit-making endeavor, that they were more interested in minimizing harms but making it available and recognizing that criminalization had harms associated with it as well, and that is what they would like to minimize as well. So the federal government, similar to what they're doing now with medical cannabis, they would regulate the production of cannabis. So who is producing that? That's a federal responsibility. They would also license these producers, and the report suggested that they encourage diverse competitive market that included small producers, so we don't see this commercialization of cannabis production. And they also asked for a seed to sale tracking system. So right from the seed to when it arrives in a distribution or a storefront or mail order, that we know where it came from. So this is just some other regulations that were provincial and territorial, just that the wholesale distribution should be regulated by the provinces and the territories, and that there should be no co-location next to alcohol, tobacco, schools, playgrounds, limit of density, and that there, if a province and municipality decided that there would be storefronts that would be selling cannabis, that they have well-trained, knowledgeable staff. We recommended also that there continue to be a direct-to-consumer mail order system, as there is with medical cannabis, because many areas of Canada are quite remote and rural, and a municipality may decide that they don't want storefront cannabis locations. The task force also recommended personal cultivation, and that would be 4 plants per resident with a maximum height of 100 centimeters. That's about 3 feet. There would be prohibitions on dangerous manufacturing processes. There would be inspections, and there would be oversight and approval by the local authorities, and that would be the municipalities. And I should say other states are doing the personal grow as well. Just that the enforcement, that it would be very clear about production, trafficking, possession, and penalties for trafficking to youth. There would be exclusions for social sharing, and that's important because a lot of youth share their cannabis, and the government felt that we shouldn't recriminalize youth. And there would be a limit of 30 grams for personal possession of non-medical dried cannabis. Okay. I'm going to go past this and just say that the workplace safety, that one of the interesting things about THC is that the science really isn't there yet to tell us when someone is impaired. And so we were recommending more research on this issue. We already have legislation about impaired driving, and that would include cannabis and any other type of drug. We already know that most of our impaired driving cases are related to alcohol, but THC is interesting because in blood testing we can detect it for 30 days, but that doesn't equal impairment. And so right now workplaces are trying to come up with some type of policy related to their workplace. And at this point, because the science isn't there about THC levels and what do you do about individuals using cannabis for medicinal purposes and are authorized to do so. So it will be around impairment rather than THC levels. So we recommended that we continue having 2 separate streams, the recreational cannabis and medical cannabis. And we also recommended that we would do a review every 5 years on both the medical and the recreational cannabis streams. So I'm running out of time, but what I felt was important to say was that there's a lot of confusion about the task force recommendations and about what will be enacted. And to just keep in mind that what we recommend, may not be picked up or partially picked up. The law won't be enacted until 2017 or 2018, and then there'll be a slow rolling out in the provinces and the territories. But what we could do right now, like from the poll that you did at the beginning of the webinar, was identifying who has policy, who's building policy right now, and who needs to start doing that, and to identify what are the concerns and the issues that people have in relation to medicinal cannabis use. Because we would assume that the recreational cannabis, you would have similar restrictions that you would have with recreational alcohol use at the shelters and transition homes. So this is already brought up, of course, the use of secure, locked cabinets and child-proof some of the hospitals and hospices have been working with that, and real effort to keep any edibles, if they do exist, because the task force did recommend that edibles be available, but they be kept away from children. To
Susan,
work with local dispensaries right now. Sorry.
Just for timekeeping purposes, we're just a tiny
Yeah,
bit over about 20 minutes right now. So if
I'm
you,
done.
oh,
Yeah,
you're okay.
yeah,
Fantastic. Fantastic. That was really incredible. Thank you so much.
yeah.
This is I think, something that's really not familiar for lots of people involved in this sector, and it's really relevant to the work that we're doing. I don't see, okay, I do see some questions. Will we get the notes afterwards? Yes, we will. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Pop that out. Okay. No, you do not take, sorry, I should have answered this earlier. You don't need to take notes. Yes, it looks like this question was already answered. Discussion to minimize risk around food items. It sounds like that was taken into account. Is there anything you want to add around that?
One of the things that we noticed when we went to Colorado was that they actually, in their packaging of food items, and they actually have drinks too, they recommend a certain serving. And so they're selling them in that serving, because with edibles, you don't feel the effect for, as long as an hour, hour and a half after you ingest it. When you inhale or smoke cannabis, you feel the effect right away. And so with edibles, the packaging will have what the dose should be, and it probably will be packaged in that one dose. We also have oils that are currently available in Canada through our licensed producers, and saying that there should be child-proof, containers for all products related to cannabis, and other prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs as well.
I see
But to
some other
say that
questions.
the risks are less with cannabis, as we know, there's no one has ever died from an overdose, but that doesn't mean that a child or an adult wouldn't feel nausea and uncomfortable if they did ingest cannabis or too much cannabis.
Okay, I see some other questions popping up. I would like to make sure that Melody has enough time to speak, so I think I'm going to leave some of these questions
Yes.
until the end period. I'm going to dock that back on the control panel, and I'm going to switch to Melody, but those questions are still being kept. The ones that we don't have time to get to, I'll try. I mean, Susan has no further obligation, but I'll send some of them to her, and she may be able to respond to them, and I'll share those as well later. So I'd like to make sure that Melody gets some time as well. Thank you so much, Susan, and we'll have
Yes.
you back at the end for some more questions.
Sure.
That was fantastic. So I'm bringing Melody up to the forefront. Melody is with MapleGate House for Women in Elliott Lake, Ontario.
Hi, Heather. I want to thank you for inviting us to be part of this presentation. We're very excited that we're discussing this not only provincially, but nationally. So I just wanted to start with our story here and where we started and why. So we started about 5 years ago. We found that wonderful Reducing Barriers toolkit that you guys were talking about in the beginning. We found that 5 years ago, and we read that and we got a lot out of it. But we also started looking at our practices, because we had a couple of things happen to clients that we weren't comfortable with. We had a client who called one night and asked to come back to the shelter, but she had had a few drinks and she was told to go to detox or find another place to stay for the night. And that client ended up spending the night sleeping on a park bench. So my question really was, how did we make her safe? Because that is our #1 priority as a shelter, is to make women safe. The second one was one of our clients went to a party and was there after curfew and couldn't come back because she was under the influence. So she stayed and she partied and she passed out on the couch and woke up in the morning upstairs in bed and had been sexually assaulted. She pressed charges, and during that process was told that she was not a credible witness because she used substances and was under the influence, and the case was dismissed, and that client ended up ODing and died. So we really started to look at what practices we had that were creating barriers for women and their safety. So we went to an OWAIT conference and saw a presentation by Kathy Willis, which was fabulous, and we started to think that harm reduction made a lot of sense and would make a big difference to many of our clients. So we started with the toolkit that we talked about, which looks like this, and you can find that online anywhere. You just do a Google search, and it is fabulous because it really speaks.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I was saying it's
Pardon?
also it's available, and resources like it are available on opendoorsproject.ca as well. Go ahead.
Oh, perfect. So it really talks about how women should be treated in shelters and how do we remove those barriers. And it has policies at the back of this toolkit that are fabulous templates. So we started with educating our board of directors, and then we had all of our staff read this toolkit. And then we had the staff help us put some draft policies together. It wasn't a comfortable process, but we had to get through it together. And we knew that we had to do something to start making a difference for women. So we still, after this process, had some fear, of course. So we did a training thing, which was really great. So I just wanted to show this. So all of our team meetings, we would have part of these presentations. So the staff were asked to pick 2 different substances that they wanted to know more about, and they had to, let me see if I can move this up a bit. I don't know how to do that. So they had to find out what was the class of drug, how women used it and what effects it had on the body, and the short-term effects of using it, the long-term effects, and most of all, what could you recommend as a harm reduction process to a woman you knew was going to be using some of these substances. So we actually did this over 2 years, and the staff did it. And it was fabulous because it took a lot of the fear away. You could see that we now had knowledge when we would see different behaviors, what substance that might be and what not to be fearful of. And we really learned a lot about looking at women's baseline behavior when they were using and when not to be fearful. So that was a big thing for us. This did a lot for us. Also, OWAIT on their website, let me see if I have this. If you go to this website, OWAIT is the Provincial Association for Ontario for Shelters. They have free online training for harm reduction. And it is fabulous. You can do it at your own pace. And it really has a lot of information about approach and policy and etc. It's good, and it has been measured successfully as having a really good retention of knowledge and also change in attitude for approaches. Also, one of the other things that I would recommend after this training would also be to do the training for documentation, and this is all under the foundations of VAW training. So the documentation really picks up the other piece about case notes and how you record case notes so that it is not stigmatizing and not harmful to women, and we're not policing them, because that's not what we're there for. We also, during part of this, I just wanted to go back to harm reduction and why we changed to that and what does it look like. So harm reduction is really not just about providing, for example, not about providing necessarily clean and sterile tools for people, but it's an approach, and it takes time to establish that. So it really sets for the women to be able to talk to you openly and honestly about their substance use. And one of the things that we have heard the most from clients is that they are so happy that they don't have to lie to us anymore. And they tell us the truth. But it really gives an opportunity for us, because we know if they're going out to use substances, and we can talk to them about what their safety plan is for harm reduction while they're going out to use. Because harm reduction is not about getting people to reduce their using or stop their using. It's a public safety approach, and it's about helping make the woman safe while she is using. So in order to really be effective in the approach for women and in harm reduction, you really have to look at a trauma-informed care approach, because almost every woman that comes into our shelters, as you know, has a really horrific past in trauma. So it's an approach that just recognizes the impact of trauma, and what the signs and symptoms are, and how we can make a difference in how we respond to them. So it actively, I just want to go back there. So this is part of our big change, is we keep looking at when we had guidelines and rules, were they there for us or were they there for the client? So we started to really resist re-traumatizing people by what we had. So there's 2 steps. If you are having women that are using substances, and you can ask them what is triggering their behavior, what's going on for them. I try not to use the word trigger. We just ask them what's going on for them, and they seem upset. Is there something that you want to talk to? Something you want to talk about to us? And you just make it really open and non-judgmental. So if someone uses on site, which we had in the beginning, we made it very, very clear to the woman that it's not acceptable at the shelter for safety reasons, and that we asked them to acknowledge that, and that there's children here as well. And often when you have that conversation ahead of time with women that use, they're very, very good about it, and they've had children sometimes they've lost children to CAS, so they're very, very respectful, and it's just having that conversation with them. We do a lot of that in the beginning when they come into the shelter. We let them know that it's a harm reduction shelter and that all women have the right to services. So when we explain it that way, often they're pretty good. So the principles for the trauma-informed care approach is really about making these 5 steps. And so for safety, it's ensuring physical and emotional safety. So how do you do that in a shelter setting when people are using? So we really speak with women if they feel triggered by anything. We talk to them about safety plans for themselves if they feel triggered. How do they take care of their emotional safety, and we make it a safe environment. We have locked boxes. We don't take people's medication. All of those pieces are there. We also talk about prioritizing empowerment and skill building for women. So always talking to them about how they can handle their triggers emotionally and how we can help with harm reduction and what can they put in place to make themselves safe. The other piece is really building trustworthiness with the clients, and that's through them just knowing what the program is and when they come in, what is going to happen next and what's expected and all the pieces. So we did a whole assessment of our shelter and things that we could change to put these things in place so women know. The other piece really that is the biggest challenge to changing how we have our model in our shelters is about collaboration and really maximizing that with the woman and sharing the power instead of us having the power with the rules and the guidelines, etc. The other piece is really giving women choice and control. And it makes a very big difference on how far they go and the goals they make and the changes and success that they have. So some of the things that really happened for us is we asked who's most vulnerable to violence against women. And in Ontario, the statistics show that out of 10 women, almost 5 to 6 of those women will be experiencing mental wellness and substance use challenges along with violence. So if we are only providing service to women that do not use substances or who do not have challenges with mental wellness, we're only providing service to 4 out of 10. So we did have those catalysts that made a big difference for us. We changed a lot of our rules to guidelines and then to rights. And that was a 4-year process for us. So we took out our curfews, we took out our chores, we took out who had to make dinner, and we took out bedtimes, we took out overnight rules. This is just where we've been. I'm not suggesting anybody does anything different than you are, but this was what we did, and it made big differences. We did have challenges. We've put pick boxes in each of the bedrooms and in the bathrooms for used equipment. We do security checks. So 3 o'clock in the morning, the staff that is on duty will do a sweep of the house for places that you may find hidden used equipment. We've only had one instance of that in 4 years. And we do have a safety kit for using to do this piece. And the warm room is something that really helped with our staff, and it was their suggestion actually. So we have a room across from our frontline office where if a staff does not feel comfortable with the level of intoxication or substance use that a client has had, but they don't feel that they need to go to the hospital in an ambulance, they will put them in the warm room. And it's a bedroom. We took the door off it and put so people can't see who's in there. But a client or a staff member can check on them and hear them all night long. We used it a few times, and they really haven't used it much recently because they feel safer with their level of education and knowledge around it and their own skills that they've built. And the other biggest challenge was us really learning how to approach and support women that are triggered, that are in the shelter. So you've heard some of our good stories. So Now that we've done this for 4 years, we created a behavior protocol that we use, and actually it's been used more in the area of mental wellness challenges than it has in substance use. And currently we've just changed our substance use policy to, let me see, we have it here. We now are starting to allow alcohol use on site, and this was for the same reason around that we went to harm reduction. So for many years, even though we were abstinence based, women have been drinking in the shelter in a closet fashion in their rooms, and we wanted to be able to deal with that more openly. So we promote it now around increasing self-control, and we do let people know the whole policy upon intake, and we've created 2 different communal areas. One is that is a drink safe zone, and one is a non-drinking zone, so that if there are any issues with children or with a mother that is under the supervision of CAS, we wanted to keep that separate in the beginning. This is a new process for us, and we'll let you know how that goes. But we didn't feel anymore that we had the right to say to women when they were coming in that they couldn't drink, because we see them drink anyways in the room. So how do we make that safer for you? And that really is our approach. So on our views on the medical marijuana and methadone, I'll start with the methadone. For many years now, probably 6-7 years, in our shelter, methadone has just been considered another medication and comes under our medicine or medication policy, and we keep a small fridge in our frontline office so that women can put their carries into it and it's safely locked up for them. We also, as far as medical marijuana, we have had 1 or 2 women so far that have come in and been under prescription for that, and both times they would go out and do that off property, but they don't really have to. They feel the stigma already, even though they have a prescription. So for us, it is the same as medicine and should be treated under our medicine and smoking policy so that it doesn't create stigma, more stigma. That's just our view and our approach, because the women that we have seen have already have their own view of their own stigma of using it. So that is where we are, and I just want to say, over this big long process for us, it was 4 years, we really changed our mantra to our clients choose us, we don't choose our clients. So I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much, Melody. That's really fantastic. I'm popping my video back up just so people can see me. We do have quite a few questions. Some of them I think have been answered in the course of the presentations as we've gone along. So we will try to save some to share some of the resources that were recommended. Some of them are already up on opendoorsproject.ca. To get on the list of shelters that are engaged in this project, it's by application to the Open Doors thing. That's for women's VAW shelters only. I know there's some people participating that are from other VAW sectors that are non-residential. So this training that we're offering through Open Doors is specifically for residential domestic violence and intimate partner violence programs across Canada. But we know that we're only reaching a drop in the bucket there.
Heather, can I just add one more thing?
Absolutely.
May I just add one more thing? I did forget to say that the first year that we went to a harm reduction model, we saw a 20% increase in our occupancy immediately in the first year. And the second and third year also increased. We added a pet shelter, so we couldn't tell whether it was from the pet shelter or the increase in the harm reduction and trauma-informed care approach. So 4 years ago, when we started this journey, we were at a 50%, regularly at 50% occupancy for a 10-bed shelter, which is single-staffed, and we've done this all single-staffed. We are now at 87% for this year. So it's made a tremendous difference in the amount of women that have been able to access our services.
Fantastic. So yeah, there's questions around workplace impairment, whether if a client has a license to grow, whether they're obligated to do that in shelter. I would hope not. I think that'd be very complicated.
No. Do you want me to answer that? They
also around the age, why it was 18 recommended and not 25. There's quite a few other questions as well.
So Heather, would you like me to answer one or two of those questions related to cannabis?
Yes, thank you, Susan. That'd be fantastic.
Okay. The recommendation around the for plant, it's limited to a person's home, and it would not be a rental home, and it would just be each home. It wouldn't be within a shelter or any other public service that's available to Canadians. They're talking about homes that people own. And so you couldn't have 5 people in a home, growing, just one, each household pour plants. In terms of the age, they went back and forth about the age, but we know that youth are the consumers that have higher rate use, and one of the goals of the government was not to criminalize youth for cannabis use. When we look at our arrest statistics each year, we can see very clearly that it's youth that are criminalized. And so they decided to recommend whatever the provincial age was for the use of alcohol. And to say that in relation to the developing mind and youth and cannabis, that some of the research is inconclusive, and we acknowledge that all the way through the report, that we need to do more research, and we need to look internationally as well at the research findings, because there are a lot of areas around cannabis that it's just not clear what the findings are saying, and oftentimes social factors haven't been included into the research design. Anyway, so that's why they recommended 18, was not to further criminalize youth, and especially marginalized youth.
Okay, we have way more questions than we'll be able to get to. But let me see, what else is another really good one that there was a question around for Melody around whether MapleGate advertised that it had changed their policies around their zero tolerance policy to a more flexible policy. How did you manage that, Melody?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Heather?
Around your occupancy increase after you changed your policies, had you advertised about that, or how did that process work where the increase happened? If did MapleGate advertise that the shelter takes in people who are currently using and will ensure harm reduction, etc.? That's from Trudy Lavallee in Manitoba.
That is a great question. So we did let other agencies know when we sat at tables for committees, etc. And in the beginning, so this is 4 years ago for us, we really experienced a backlash, but we were really strong about our beliefs for women. So in the beginning, we did not, we had people that wouldn't refer to us, but because there has been more and more education around harm reduction, and it's now viewed more as a best practice. People got way more comfortable about it, and we went and spoke at different meetings. So we would go to center and speak about what that means, like what is our approach and what does harm reduction mean for us and for the women. And we actually had one of the managers or regional directors, yes, from CAS, come for a tour of our shelter so that she could see what safety precautions we had in place and what our policies were. And the biggest one, I think, that had the most effect was going to speak to our provincial police locally to let them know what that harm reduction meant, etc., and what a difference it could make for them, which it really did. They started to really understand the difference and how much better it was for women. So it was really about educating other service providers and letting them know what it was and what it wasn't. No, it doesn't mean that women are openly using on-site, etc. This is what it means. So we shared our policies, our practices, and what the advantage would be to other organizations to refer to us. That made a huge difference. When people call on our crisis line and come in for an intake, we do let them know it is a harm reduction facility and what that means. So we work really hard around educating and letting them know that it's still a safe place.
Mm-hmm. I see some questions around.
Sorry, that was.
Yeah. We still have quite a lot of people here, but of course I just want to check in with my presenters about your timelines. Are you able to stick around for a couple more minutes and answer some more questions, or do we need to wrap up for your sake?
I'm good, Heather. I can stay.
I'm good as well.
Okay, well then we've still got 89 people logged in, which is really astounding and fantastic. So thank you all of you for sharing your time with us. This is really exciting. I have some questions around how shelters would gauge the appropriate, this would probably be a question for Melody as well, how would shelters gauge the appropriate amount of alcohol that a woman can consume and balance that with the safety and comfort of children and mothers of children that are in the shelter as well?
That is a great question. So one of the biggest experiences we've had is really changing our view about not engaging in how much any one person has, because each person is different and they have a different tolerance level, and whether you use or don't use isn't the issue. It's about the behavior. So we only address behaviors. We don't address the other things. So one woman may be able to have 4 drinks and be okay, and another woman might be able to have 10 and be okay. If someone is starting to engage in assertive behavior that is making other people feel unsafe, then we go into our behavior protocol. And that's about...
That brings into another question from the same person about what are the rights of the shelter workers if a woman becomes out of control and starts exhibiting inappropriate behaviors in the shelter?
Okay, so our first thing here is we've really worked hard on educating ourselves on how to help de-escalate someone, and we go through our behavior protocol. So then the staff have to use the behavior protocol, which is we will ask a woman if she would like to come and talk about what she's upset about and get them to come out of communal areas and come and talk. Often that really, really works. The second step is if she doesn't want to talk, and that is her right, she is then asked to go to a private space. That may be her bedroom, that may be another area of the shelter where there aren't people, or that may be going for a walk outside. If none of those work and there's still behavior and it is accelerating, then the staff has absolutely the right to call the police. We have only, I'm not even sure that we've had that once. We've really, really, really worked on our skills so that we feel comfortable, and we have a higher level of I don't even know what word to use, confidence in how we handle those situations, but that's come through training. But if you didn't feel comfortable at all, you can call an ambulance. We have had to do that a couple of times, and you can call the police, but you must show that you've tried to use the behavior protocol first.
All right, I'm just sharing some things about naloxone. Probably responding to the wrong questions because I'm still figuring out this question thing, but yeah. So there's some questions around sharing some of the policies and practices. Melody, do you have any of those that are available publicly, or that you'd be willing to share as templates?
Absolutely. Just send me a list of what you would like. I am so excited that we are having this conversation nationally and that things are moving forward. It makes a big difference to the women who need our services.
Okay. And I'm seeing I'm seeing a lot of questions from one person. Would it be possible maybe to put the two of you directly into contact? I'm thinking specifically Melody and the person that's asking a number of questions, who seems to have some specific concerns that might be best addressed in a one-to-one conversation. Would that be something that you'd be open to, Melody? Okay, so
Absolutely.
Heather, do you think I can chime in on something that Melody mentioned as well?
Yes, please do, Susan. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just so excited to hear your presentation, Melody, because my earlier work, and that I continue now, was with women in harm reduction. And in the early 1990s, myself and some other women created the first harm reduction program for women and children, pregnant women. And they were sort of the hardest to reach women who were not able to maintain abstinence. And so they had no programs available to them at that time. And similar to what you're creating in the shelters, we came together with the women and asked them, well, what are your needs? What do you need? What can we provide in a program that would be safe for you and your children, and the goals that you have for yourself? So I wanted to say these programs, they're not, they don't reject abstinence. It's just to say that for some people, abstinence is not going to be achieved. And that there are harm reduction, a philosophy, as you say, and a practice that can help keep people safe as well. But what we found too in our program, that it was about the behaviors. So we had sort of a no violence zone, because we have children there as well, and saw it in that sense, and always this open and back and forth conversation with the women in relation to, how can we facilitate your needs and your goals, and worked with it that way. And at that time, there was so much controversy for us too, because many of the women were pregnant. But I have to say, those programs have become much more conventional, and they really have quite a bit of success here in Canada and outside of Canada.
Thank you, Susan. That is what we were trying to achieve, and it is because of some of the responses that we've had from women, that we have moved in this direction, especially around the medication policy.
Yeah.
So we had an Indigenous woman who was here, and she was about 65, and just outwardly told us how we made her feel like a child by taking her medication and then having her sign it out. And it was really, we just started to really listen to what they needed. We don't deal with that. We don't stigmatize it. We do things in private areas, and we only address behaviors. So it's not that you're using that we're addressing anything, it's a behavior. So other clients don't even really know if that has to do with you using or just your assertive behavior. And that's what we address. So yeah, it's the clients what a lot of their wishes are.
It's wonderful.
Okay. So I'm just trying to see if there's any more. There's a lot of questions here. There's. I wanted to make sure that there's questions for Susan as well, but I think we did cover them. It was, I think we have to end it here. We're already 15 minutes over time, which is really impressive that we still have almost 80 people logged in, 15 minutes over time, and I know how busy and demanding shelter work is. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up for now, and we'll try to keep exploring some of these questions that we have. It's not something we can do all in one go, but I hope that it's been really informative and a good start for people. The next workshop that we're aiming to do is going to be focused on giving some of the background, some of the core basic information around trauma-informed approaches and lower barrier services targeted at board members, because a lot of shelters, it's a community-based board. They may not have that background and training, and they may have some real concerns. And having that background, getting everyone on the same page, is something that we've heard would be really beneficial for shelters. So it's something that we're aiming at for our next webinar, which should be really fun and exciting. This one has been really tremendous, a great start to the series, and I want to thank our presenters, Susan Boyd and Melanie Rose, for all of their fantastic amounts of time and dedication to sharing this information with so many people across Canada. We had a maxed out participation rate, which I was not expecting, and it's so delightful, and it stayed maxed out until the very, very end, and we still have 75 people on, so it's really, really blowing me away, and I'm very delighted, and it's making me excited to keep doing these webinars. So thank you so much. Any final words, Susan?
No, just thank you, Heather, and thank you, Melody, and everyone who joined in the webinar. I found it very informative too, so thank you for setting it up.
Thank you both, Susan and Heather. I would like to say that the people that are still on the line, I would really encourage you to take the next webinar, because this is how we started. We started with educating our board and then making a resolution that we would change our model so that it came from the top down, and we involved all our staff at all processes. But you really need to train and educate your board of directors, and it will make a big difference. We were very lucky. We had several medical people on our board that just got it. They understood it and just said, yes, absolutely, which was nice.
And just to reiterate, Melody is from MapleGate Shelter, for anyone that didn't catch that. So it's also in the introduction to the emails that you would have gotten. And she's, yeah. So thank you so much to everybody, and we will be in touch. And I'll share the recording. I'm going to stop it now. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.